Alex has been approached by a consulting company who wish to automate the process of creating staff timesheets. They have several staff who need to record their time on a weekly basis, but who do not have the experience in working with Excel. Alex is going to use a macro to help automate the process of generating these timesheets for them. And what we're going to focus on this week is looking at how we can record, run, and edit macros. Now, the first thing we need to do is show our developer tab in the ribbon. So we're going to come to the File tab, and we're going to come down to Options, select Customize Ribbon in the left-hand panel, and then on the right-hand side you'll see all the ribbon tabs. Most of them are selected by default, but the developer tab is not. So we're going to just make sure that is ticked and then say OK. You should now see the developer tab in the ribbon, and if you click on it, the first group is called the code group, and that has all the tools we're going to need to work with macros. We're now ready to start recording our macro. The way it works when we record our macro is we hit the record button, we give it a name and specify where we want to store it. We then go through all the steps that we want Excel to remember us doing, and then press stop. Excel will record each step in a language called VBA, or Visual Basic for Applications, and we can then play those steps back as often as we like. Let's see how it's done. So we're going to click the Record Macro button, and we're going to give it a sensible name. This can be anything, provided it doesn't include spaces or unusual punctuation. So underscores, numbers and letters. Okay, we're going to call this create underscore timesheet. We're also going to give it a shortcut key, although this is not required. Now, Control A through Z are pretty much accounted for, so hold your Shift key down and then select an appropriate letter. I'm going to go for T for timesheet, and so the shortcut is going to be Control Shift T. And then last thing I need to do before recording is decide where to store the macro. Put simply, you have two options. You can either store it in this workbook, which means the macro will travel with the workbook. Alternatively, if you want to keep a macro that you're going to use with lots of workbooks and it's not going to travel with any one of them particularly, you can store it in your personal macro workbook. This will be stored in your Excel Startup folder and will open up but remain hidden every time you work with Excel. So any macros stored there will always be available to you on your computer, but will not be available to anybody else. In this case, we need it to be stored in this workbook, so we're going to leave that. And we're going to say OK. Now from here on, everything I do is going to be recorded. So I want to try and not make any mistakes if possible. First thing I need to do is to create a new worksheet. So I'm going to click on the plus at the bottom, and then I'm going to give this worksheet a heading, which is going to be Weekly Timesheet. Then click Enter. Then I'm going to need to put week commencing, followed by a colon, and press Enter twice. We're then going to need some headings for our actual data. So I'm going to put day, hours, total. Press Enter once. Now our day, we're going to start with Monday, and then I'm just going to get my fill handle and drag that down to Sunday. And then we should have a little total row as well. We'll now need to put a few little calculations in. The way it's going to work is hourly rate has been saved as a named range, but we do time and a half if it's Saturday or Sunday. So we're going to need a little if function. So we're going to type equals if and open our brackets. Our logical test is going to check if it's Saturday or Sunday. So I'm going to put an or and then check if my day is equal to Saturday or if my day is equal to Sunday. There's my or, so I'm going to close my brackets and type a comma. If that is true, if either it is Saturday or Sunday, then I'm going to take the hours times by my rate, which is a named range, rate hourly, times by 1.5. If it's not the case, then I'm just going to do B5 times by my hourly rate. Don't forget to close your brackets for your if and click Enter. And now we can copy that little formula down. And then we'll just add all of those values up. So we're going to click into C12, come to our Home tab, click on the auto sum and enter. And then before we finish, it'd be nice to have a little bit of formatting. So we're going to click into A1 and we're going to make that size 16, and let's make that blue as well. And we're going to make our week commencing bold, and we'll do the same with this little row of headings, and maybe make that first column a little bit wider. And then finally we'll add some borders to our total row so it looks a bit more like a total row, top and double bottom border. I'm then going to click into B5, which is where I would like to have my cell selected when the macro completes. I've now finished recording my macro, so very importantly, I must now press stop. So back to my developer tab and stop recording. Don't forget that step, it's really important. Now, of course, the first thing I want to do is test this macro, but before I can, it's very important I save the workbook. Any changes made by a macro cannot be undone. So if your macro messed up your workbook and you had to close without saving, you would lose any changes in your workbook and you would lose your macro. So very important to save first. Now what I should do at this point is click File, Save As, but just to show you what happens if you forget that step, I'm going to just hit the Save button. And a message pops up, and what this message is saying is that you cannot save macros in a standard Excel workbook. And if I go ahead and press yes, it's actually going to delete my macro, which would be really frustrating. So I'm going to click No, and that's going to take me to the Save As, which is where I should have gone in the first place. And it's very important when you want to save a workbook with a macro that you save it as a macro-enabled workbook, or XLSM. You can also save it as a binary, they support macros, and if this were a template, I could save it as a macro-enabled template. So any of those are fine, but not XLSX. So I'm going to choose XLSM and click Save. And I've now saved my macro in a brand new workbook called XLSM. In the next video, we're going to look at how we can run the macro, so keep watching.